Hi, everybody. I am your host, Jay Jennings, and we bring to you another great episode about Universal Horror and, of course, uh, the Sherlock Holmes films. But, of course, this show would not be possible at all with a great person and a close friend of mine, and that's the one and only Courtney Joyner. Hey, Court.
Hey Jay, this is great. I feel like Mrs. Hudson's great grandnephew.
And what do you got behind you there?
Yes. Oh, the beautiful half sheet to Terror by Night, and boy, I acquired this a long time. I used to have an awful lot of Sherlock Holmes stuff. Beautiful one sheet to Pearl of Death and things, and you trade and you go for some rare lobby cards and things like that. So my Rathbone Holmes collection has kind of gone up and down. Right now, it's kind of a little bit on the upside.
Right,
But
but it looks
I love this piece. Oops, I love that. It's so complicated. I love this piece, uh, also because it's one of the better later Holmes films,
well, yeah,
and
I think it's the last or second to last. Yeah.
yeah, written by Frank Gruber, and really neat. I love that one, and the femme fatale there, Renee Godfrey, uh, is the
It's one of
wife
my
of Peter
ex-wives,
Godfrey.
Court.
No, one of your yes,
Ramsey Ames,
everybody's
Renee
ex-wife.
God,
Yes,
right?
and
Ramsey
she
Ames,
was.
Renee Godfrey, yeah, both exes. So we got a special show today for everybody, and of course the horror-based one, the Scarlet Claw. But I'm going to give a little, I guess, just a little intro to the series, and then we'll talk about it. And Court will give his analysis. As I said, there was a 14 films based on Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes between 39 and 46. Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce played Holmes and Watson. First two films, as I said, were for Fox, and then the others were for Universal. They acquired the rights. Um, Although the first two were big budgeted ones, Court, in the Victorian era, Universal decided to update them and have Holmes fighting people like the Nazis, and they were produced kind of like B pictures with lower budgets. And Rathbone and Bruce continued their roles when the series changed studios, as did Mary Gordon, who played the reoccurring character Mrs. Hudson. What's your take on the Universal film, Court, before I give a little bit more background?
Well, Jay, of course, the big thing with Fox was it was the acquiring the stuff from the Conan Doyle estate, and he was dead, and now his heirs were dealing with it. But Daryl Zanuck just had decided he did not want to do any more series films. So they got rid of Sherlock Holmes at the same time they got rid of Charlie Chan and Mr. Moto. So right out the door. And I've always felt Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. I like Hound of the Baskervilles quite well, but actually prefer the Hammer version. But Adventures of Sherlock Holmes is absolutely wonderful, and of course that's George Zucco as Professor Moriarty
Right. And no,
after the
those,
Crown Jewels.
of course, and they're all great films. And then in the '70s, the four of those films fell into the public domain. That's why they were on
Yep.
television so much. Their copyright wasn't renewed. Even some of them were restored and colorized, which I'm not a big fan of. But and they degraded over time before the advent of digitalization and Blu-ray. But thankfully, they've all been restored, and you can see them, all of them in its entirety in Blu-ray. Many. Many great actors to, I guess, feature players in reoccurring characters. Of course, the aforementioned Mary Gordon, who played Mrs. Hudson. You had the great Dennis Hoey, who played Inspector Lestrade. You also had Professor Moriarty, was played by three people. Lionel Atwill in Secret Weapon, Henry Daniell in Woman in Green, and of course George Zucco in Adventures of Sherlock Holmes. And some supporting actors reappeared in a number of roles. Harry Cording, who's always playing some sort of criminal midshipman or who hangs out at the bar near the docks. Gerald Hamer and Harold DeBecker. Are those the main three, Court?
Well, I would add Alec Craig and Miles Mander, Holmes Herbert, absolutely.
And
Uh,
Olaf Haydn?
Olaf Haydn was just, I always thought that was really a fun thing that you would sometimes in different roles, of course, Paul Kavanaugh, for example, and Ian Wolfe. It was just this plethora of these guys, this wonderful, as you said, this troupe, this stock company that also were the earmarks of these movies.
Anyway, that's the background, I guess, on the Holmes series, and it's a fan favorite. If you're a fan of Universal horror films, Frankenstein, Dracula, the Wolfman, these Holmes films, in my humble opinion, have the same atmosphere, the same mist, the same fog, the same music almost, and go to, I think, the quintessential horror film of the genre. I mean, you can say a few of them are, but this one has, I mean, there's a creature that's phosphorus that glows in the dark that runs across the moors or the marshes and kills people with a claw, hence the title The Scarlet Claw. And I'll give a little background on that first before we go into it in more detail. This was the 8th entry into the Rathbone Bruce series. Scarlet Claw is basically one of the best. You can say it's probably a top 3. I know it's a
Oh,
lot of people's favorites.
absolutely.
I think my favorite, Court, and we'll get when we get to this episode down the road, is Sherlock Holmes Faces Death with the chessboard. I just love that film to pieces. But this could be a close second or third. It's a brilliantly crafted mystery that keeps the viewer guessing right until the end. There's no way in heck you're going to know it's the mailman who did it. And it's a completely original story, not based on any Conan Doyle story, and it takes place in Canada. So, of course, that means Mary Gordon and Inspector Lestrade, Mrs. Hudson, and Inspector Lestrade are not seen in this. The foggy marsh is incredible. The tolling bell in the old church creates a foreboding atmosphere. And the acting is first rate, of course. Little Canadian village with the great titled name, La Mort de Rouge, and where something has been killing sheep by tearing their throats open. And the body of Lady Penrose is found with her throat ripped. But in Quebec, Holmes and Watson are attending a meeting of the Royal Canadian Occult Society. What are they doing there? I didn't know they're in the cult. Were they contacting Lucifer? But anyway, Lord Penrose is there, played by the great Paul Kavanaugh from House of Wax. And Holmes learns that Lady Penrose has been murdered, and he receives a letter. He received a letter stating she fears for her life. Unfortunately, this isn't a lot of films. Holmes gets there too late. Is it on purpose? Or does he just, maybe that's a mistake by the writers, but or maybe that would take care of the story. But Holmes gets to a place to investigate the death, but someone wrote him a letter saying, "Could you come, kind of watch me?" And Holmes always gets there too late. But anyway, they travel to La Mort de Rouge to investigate, and Holmes comments to Watson, "For the first time, we've been retained by a corpse," kind of like foreshadowing. Scared to Death with Lugosi, right, Court?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
So anyway, the villagers believe the killer is a legendary monster. It's always those dumb villagers that they would just think for themselves, that it's probably a crazy person. But anyway, it must be a phantom that lives in the marshes. But Holmes believes the fiend is flesh and blood like he always does. And there must be a motive for killing Lady Penrose. And when Holmes sees the body of Lady Penrose, he recognizes her as the actress Lillian Gentry, who disappeared several years previously. This film, Court, has people whose names were different in previous incarnations. They were known as this person. They had 2 different aliases. So this film really plays around with the characters and what their names used to be. So anyway, finds out that several years previously, he deduces that the murderer is Alistair Ramsden, an actor who was imprisoned for killing another actor in a jealous rage over Lillian Gentry. So he escaped from prison, came to La Mort de Rouge. That's what he's figuring out, but who is it? So anyway, he uses more disguises, and Alistair Ramsden uses various disguises, and he lives inconspicuously among the villagers for 3 years, and he's established a character, perhaps several others, as I said, who are now familiar to the people, and so he's above suspicion. Oh, it couldn't be the mailman. So anyway, 2 other people's lives are in danger. Judge Brisson, who sentenced Ramsden, and the innkeeper Journet, who was a guard at the prison, played by the great Arthur Hole. And Holmes sets a trap for the killer, uses Journet as the bait, and Ramsden's disguise is revealed, solving the mystery. He's the mailman. But anyway, the final scene shows Holmes and Watson driving to the coast, where they do their famous Churchillian line, Canada, linchpin of the English-speaking world, whose relations of friendly intimacy with the U.S. on the one hand and her unswerving fidelity to the British Commonwealth of the motherland on the other. So anyway, so Court, of course, this is some great film, great atmosphere, great fog, great mystery, and the killer is obviously a meek person, but he has different personalities. He's almost like Norman Bates. He suffers from multiple personalities. So tell us what your thoughts on the film as I show some images.
Well, first of all, I should say that when I was in high school, I managed to scrape together the money to buy a 16 millimeter print of this movie. So I've probably seen the Scarlet Claw about 80 times.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just obsessed with it. I think one of the great things about the movie is if you look at again, I always go to the writing credits. Roy William Neill came up with a story for this one with Edmund Hartman himself. So I love the fact that it's a psychopathic actor. I think that's a bit of a statement in itself from a director who is probably tired of dealing with all these guys. And so he creates this scenario of a psychopathic actor eliminating other actors and causing all kinds of chaos. And the co-screenwriter here, Edmund Hartman, is now, of course, part of television legend because he created and produced My Three Sons. But he was very involved with Universal because he wrote some Abbott and Costello movies, including The Naughty Nineties, which is the feature which has Who's on First in it. And Here Come the Co-Eds, but he also the Maria Montez pictures and that and what have you. So he was a great utility man and became a huge comedy screenwriter. He wrote Paleface with Bob Hope,
Right.
and so he was a real great wordsmith. And they structured this like a Universal horror film. The fact that it is set in Canada kind of frees Holmes and Watson up a little bit as far as their movement. And also, one thing I think you can really notice in this movie is the level of production value in Scarlet Claw is really elevated. The scenes in the hotel in Canada, that's a beautiful set. It's huge, lots of extras, the meeting of the occult society, all of these things, and where the old abbey where some of the murders have taken place,
And there's
etc.
the
Et cetera.
hotel.
There's an expanse to this movie that I think Neil kind of demanded, saying, "Look, maybe we've been a little too claustrophobic. Let's really open this up." And of course, we do have all these wonderful scenes with John P. Fulton effects of the monster running across the marsh there, and Holmes shooting at it, and he's absolutely convinced it's a human being in a tricked out suit. Of course, it is. And when we look at this also in the context of Universal horror, the cast,
And wait,
boy,
wait, Court. One of the great candelabras in movie history, Court.
yes, right there. And but you have Kay Harding playing the young daughter of the innkeeper of Arthur Hole. And she, unfortunately, also is a victim of the Scarlet Claw. Of course, she's the young leading lady in The Mummy's Curse.
Hold on, let me see if I could find a photo of her.
Okay,
There she is.
there she is. And
And of course, Watson has to flirt with her.
of course, and actually, I think by this time she was very young. She was about, I think, 17 or 18 years old. She was already married.
Interesting.
So, but then, of course, Miles Mander as the retired judge. Now, Miles Mander had been such a fixture in the Holmes films, and particularly in there he is in Pearl of Death, and
Right,
just
and remember, he's also a victim. He knows that the Scarlet Claw is going to come after him, so he
absolutely
pretends to be an invalid, as if a killer would care whether you're an invalid or not. But he's in hiding, and he's always armed with a shotgun. And it's a great scene, Court, a great individual scene. How Holmes uses some wordplay and reasoning to get him to open the door.
yes. And the and also too we have uh, the wonderful um, who's playing his maid, Victoria Horn
Okay. Oh,
plays
that's right. Okay, the older woman.
plays the housekeeper,
Right.
and then the killer disguises himself as her
Oh, that's right.
to
And the killer
rip out
also
the judge's
disguises,
throat.
and also predating Twin Peaks, like Fire Walk with Me, the killer dresses up as like a weird Eskimo Indian court.
Yep,
Also, the great David Clyde is in this as the sheriff of the town.
he's the town constable.
That's right.
Yep,
And there's a
and
great scene of him. They're searching. This is the scene where they find Ramson dressed up as kind of this crazy, because it's a little white guy and he's dressed up as kind of like this Alaskan Indian, uh,
right, he's supposed to be yes a local
Canadian
fisherman.
log rolling killer.
Right, and he's this local, yeah, local tough, local fisherman who lives in this condemned house, and then leaps out of the house into the water, and they think they've killed him again, but it
Right.
is just the actor in disguise.
And talking about great atmosphere, here's the picture of the marshes. Look at that fog.
Yes, yeah.
You going
This
in there,
film is
Mr. Robes?
yeah, this film is beautifully shot, and one of the things too with again going to the horror aspect, going back to writer Edmund Hartman, he wrote a kind of slightly anemic but very interesting monogram horror movie called Face of Marble
Oh, that's a good
with
one. John Carradine.
Robert Shane and John Carradine. Yes, that was so he was very much you know a fellow who was in the groove for this type of material. But the structure of this movie, just because they have a phantom, they have this ghost. So this is the horror film of the Sherlock Holmes series.
Yes,
And,
pretty much so. Yes.
yeah, and
There's
Paul
Paul Kavanaugh.
Kavanaugh here. I also I love the way that this is done because there's usually always someone who once Sherlock Holmes is brought onto a case objects. We don't need him. Private detectives are day class A and they bring everything down. We don't want to fool with a private detective. Paul Kavanaugh is openly hostile towards Holmes. And I think that's just it's a wonderful thing. It's like Sherlock Holmes is not welcomed over and over again as sometimes as you think that the hero of a movie would be. A lot of people just want him to go to hell. They have no interest in what he has to say. And Kavanaugh is very much that character.
Oh,
And he
absolutely.
feels constantly intruded upon by Holmes, who even breaks the sanctity of Kavanaugh's grief by looking at his wife's corpse without his permission.
Right. I remember that scene. Yeah. And then, of course, I mentioned Arthur Hole, who is a great character actor, probably outside of this film, best known for he almost co-starred in Island of Lost Souls.
Yes, he sure did.
I think he
And
was the friend of Richard Arlen in that movie.
yep.
And it's he's Holmes is presenting the claw. How do we know you're not the Scarlet Claw? He goes, me. I'm worried about me and my daughter. So there's a lot of great character actors, as we mentioned.
And the fact that Kay Harding gets killed is also a very unusual twist here for this series because she is a total innocent, has nothing to do with any of this, but is being held responsible for the perceived crimes of her father by this criminal who he felt was mistreated by her dad when he was in prison. So uh, to actually just slaughter someone from the sidelines is another horrific element to the story, isn't it? It's not that was not the usual thing that
Almost
they did.
very another pre-code. A lot of pre-code kind of murders in these films. Gerald Hamer is another great there he is actor who's in a lot of great films. He's in Terror by Night as one of the older couples in the film.
Yep.
And but the thought about Gerald Hamer is he plays the first, if you think about it, the cinema's first killer mailman. Court.
Yes. And but Hamer was also such a wonderful utility actor who just appeared in so many terrific movies, and he worked with John Ford. I mean, Hamer was, and I think that I guess the point I'm trying to make here is that you have a director in Roy William Neill who is now the producer of this series. He's got this group of wonderful actors, this his own stock company, and he is writing specifically in this case because he did co-write the script specifically for their talents and their abilities. And I think that is one of the things that sets this series apart is that you had truly one person in charge of the whole thing, not a supervising producer, but a director in charge of this series, and he was the one who was pushing it towards whatever artistic direction it was going to go, and also get the best out of this whole troupe of actors with whom he was incredibly comfortable.
And speaking of artistic and atmospheric, look at the claw shadow on Dr. Watson there.
Yep.
That's from an earlier scene where they try to confront Ramson. They hear some shenanigans going upstairs, and they have to investigate. Shot very. You're at a horror film. I'm trying to think of what other film it might remind me of, but there's a few. It's got elements of various other Universal horror
Well,
films.
and the way the monster is presented reminds us very much of Boris Karloff's glowing effects in The Invisible Ray and Lon Chaney Jr. in Man Made Monster, all of which was the work of John P. Fulton.
Right, and there's Holmes finding the piece of the phosphorus clothing.
And yep,
And this is another red herring because it makes you believe, because I guess the Gerald Hamer character is leaving these phosphorus clues, I guess, to disassociate himself from the crime.
that's right. And sending Holmes off on some other track that he's gonna some huge bulking Harry Cording like guy is the one who's responsible for being the monster, and it's little mild Gerald Hamer who's this psychopath.
Right, and then the kind of the closing moments of the film where Holmes goes in one of his disguises. I don't think he needed to, but I guess he did that to fool to fool Ramson, because Ramson was very surprised. Oh my God, it's you, Mr. Holmes. How did you know it was me? And then of
Well,
course Holmes.
he disguises himself as Arthur Hole.
That's right. That's right. But much taller Arthur Hole.
Yes.
And I remember this great shot kind of sums up. And then he runs into the marshes. So it's a great closing scene. So what are your final thoughts on this movie, Court?
Well, I just love this movie, and by the way, speaking of Arthur Hole, of course, he is the drunk skeptic at the beginning of The Frozen Ghost who dies of a heart attack while under hypnosis with
That's
Lon
right.
Chaney's powers of his mind. Uh, I think this movie is, to me, it's the best of the Holmes series. And I love all of them to varying degrees. I think one day you and I will have us talk, and I will straighten you out about Sherlock Holmes faces death. But this is it's just all the elements came together. It isn't a movie about propaganda. It doesn't have an espionage element to it. This is a straight murder mystery, and
Right.
with this horror to it. Now, of course, Roy William Neill again had just had tremendous success in directing Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. So, and he could handle this type of material so well. And I think that also fed into, if you will, the kind of the creative palette when they decided they wanted to put Sherlock Holmes into a different world, away from Baker Street, away from London, and let's drop him into this marsh, this fog bound Canadian town could be Visaria.
Oh, that's true. No, absolutely. There's elements of everything in this, which is fantastic. But it's very spooky. But at every show, any closing remarks until next time?
No, I'm just so really happy that we did this about Sherlock Holmes because there was just so much there to be enjoyed and savored and what have you. And I've always felt that the movies kind of get a little bit of the short stick, and so I hope we corrected that or push people towards them just a little bit, even if you haven't explored them yet.
But anyway, Court, thanks again for joining us here. And we're going to see you guys next time. And we'll make it fun and interesting. And we'll show lots of rare images like we always do. So, Court, you want to say goodbye to everybody?
Bye, everybody, and hey, a perfect evening. Watch the Scarlet Claw while you're building a Frankenstein's flivver.